Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Let me know if you can hear me. اللهم افتح لنا فتوح العارفين وفقنا توفيق الصالحين اللهم بالقرآن وذكر الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا أصلح لنا شأننا كله لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك نويت التعلم والتعليم والنفع انتفاع تذكر التذكير والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وادعو على الهدى دعوة الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى آمين. So let me know inshallah if you can hear me. Let me know if you can hear me. Okay, okay, good. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna redress some material from the last class, and I'm assuming everyone heard the either attended or heard the first lesson because I'm building upon the first lesson, inshallah. So in the first lesson, what we did was we basically covered the fard of wudu and the sunnahs of wudu and some other material like how one reaches, what are the signs of puberty, and according to the Maliki school, and I know it is a little bit stricter than in some of the other schools. So I wanted to mention that also because I think that was also another question. Are there any questions before we start? Anything that anybody wants to ask? They can either post it on the. It's not very loud. Okay, hang on a second. Let me see if I can make it louder. Whoops, sorry about that. That was my finger. I'm gonna move the mic up. Is that better? Okay, so okay, here is something that I wanted to mention. I wanted to review a little bit from last time. So we covered the sunnahs of wudu. Again, in general, it's makruh or it's discouraged to leave a sunnah. These are confirmed acts, confirmed sunnahs of wudu. So I changed the slide a little bit. That's why I'm reposting it. So washing the hands to the wrists when one begins, when one starts one's wudu with intention of a sunnah act, right? Because this is an actual sunnah act. Rinsing the mouth once is a sunnah. Right, I had said rinsing it. I had a lot more material on this slide, so rinsing it once is sunnah. Just doing it once. Sniffing water up the nostrils once is confirmed sunnah. Blowing water out of the nostrils, obviously, it's going to be what's in the nose. And return wiping of the head. And this is only done if water remains on the hands from the initial wiping of the head. Inshallah, this is clear. So if one wipes the head and then looks and the hand palms are dry, you wouldn't, when you get more water, to do the return wiping. And remember, in the Maliki you have to do the entire hair, so you wouldn't have to undo a bun but not undo a braid. And then wiping the index ears, and this is we mentioned this in the last class, and not the creases, because in general wiping is built upon ease. Right, and that's kind of a general principle. Wiping is built upon ease, so you're not going to be thorough like you are with the washing, right? So it's actually makruh to do the creases. So more is not always better in the Sharia, right? And especially these acts, these devotional acts, they're generally going to be ta'abudi, meaning that we don't know the illah, or the rationale, the legal cause behind them. Right? So one might say, well, it's rationally it makes sense to, do the creases. But these devotional acts generally are not based on, there's no legal reasoning. It's just, the Prophet did it, and we do it. Right? So, generally speaking, renewing water for the ears, right? That's also confirmed sunnah. So that's another sunnah. So wiping the ears is a sunnah, and then getting more. So your hands might be wet still, maybe from the wiping the head, but renewing the water for the ears would be an additional sunnah. So you don't want to leave that. And then the actual order of the obligations of the wudu is actually is a sunnah, because it's in the Quran, and it's actually wajib in the Shafi'i. So. And generally, the Malikis there's a principle of muratan lil khilaf, giving deference to difference of opinions. SubhanAllah, there's so much fighting now, and SubhanAllah, this is a really big principle that certain things might be, might take a slightly different ruling in the Maliki school, and they'll say, if in the usul, they'll say, so the principles of fiqh, they'll say muratan lil khilaf, just out of deference to, the difference of opinion, meaning in another school. And I just think that's so beautiful, especially with all the fighting, subhanAllah. And that's, I think, helped me also just be careful about, when I'm around, especially in the States. One's going to be around all kinds of people, and there's different schools people are practicing, as opposed to, like in a primarily Hanafi country like Pakistan, or primarily Maliki country like Morocco, although now things are changing all over the world. So again, the sunnahs are what the Prophet ﷺ did pretty much. He did them all the time. Okay, so this is new. So virtuous acts, or you'll call them the mandubat, right? Recommended acts. It's the same thing. So they're lower than a sunnah, and sometimes you'll get different opinion. Is it a sunnah act, or is it the lower category, which is a virtuous act? So some scholars said the number goes up to 30. SubhanAllah. Because if we have a good wudu, SubhanAllah, the prayer is so much better. Anyway, in some of the, they'll mention that sometimes the number actually goes up to 30, and I'm mentioning some of them. So uttering the Bismillah, and the the short version. I have another slide where I talk a little bit more about the Bismillah, because the Malikis a little bit, they have a nuanced answer about whether you should say the full Bismillah or Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. There's difference of opinion. So saying it's enough to just say Bismillah if you want. But if you want to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, obviously then you get out of the difference of opinion between the schools of thought. That's what I mean by the short version. And it's also you'd also do it when you're eating, drinking, slaughtering, riding, having intercourse. And again, I have a separate slide on this. I'll go over it in more detail, because here it's a recommended act, and in certain situations it's going to be a sunnah and the like. I mean, in general, saying the Bismillah is right. We mentioned the hadith, I think, in the last class, that كل أمر ذي بال لا يبدأ به ببسم الله فهو أقدر. Any weighty matter, ذي بال, right? Anything that has weight, meaning in the Sharia and Islam, and it doesn't start with Bismillah, أقدر. It's cut off. And the scholars said أقدر أي قليل البركة, meaning it doesn't have a lot of barakah. And so anything like, opening a book of sacred knowledge, unless there's something else that's been legislated for the start of that action, the default is to say Bismillah. Does that make sense? So like starting the prayer, what's legislated is saying Allahu Akbar. So one doesn't say Bismillah, because something else is legislated. And of course, the salah is a very weighty matter, but we don't say Bismillah. Why? Because something else is legislated. But if there's another weighty matter, something important in the Sharia, where something else is not legislated to say, at the beginning of it, if one doesn't say Bismillah, then it's cut off. A qalil barakah, which means that, barakah meaning that it's not, and there's two ways to tell where there's something has barakah in it. One, that one may not finish the act, or one may finish the act, but for example, if one's writing a book, maybe a lot of people won't read it. Some books, like, for example, Risalah ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani is so blessed, like there's so many commentaries on it, and that's barakah, right? Is righteous people using that knowledge, or it benefiting the ummah. That's mubarak. So uttering the Bismillah, and certainly when one's doing wudu. And if you don't remember in the beginning, just say it anytime you'll remember, right? So if you can't do all of it, don't leave all of it. That's another principle. Ma la yuf'alu kullu, la yutraku kullu. Can't do all of it, don't leave all of it. So saying the Bismillah, using a siwak. So siwak is anything that cleans the teeth. It suffices as having done the virtuous act. It's stronger to use the arak, which is what we call a siwak is actually the arak. But siwak could be anything that cleans the teeth, you could call it a siwak. But arak is from that specific tree. Washing the hands and face more than once. Right, so this is what I wanted to clarify. So there's a difference of opinion whether doing the second and the third washing, right? Because the washing will be multiple times, as opposed to the wiping will only be once. Remember, because the wiping is built upon ease, takhfif. So wipings are generally only going to be once. So washing, the first time maybe fard, if it's the face, right? Or the full arm when you're doing the fard of the arm. Or initially when you're washing the hands, you're just doing the sunnah, right? So repeat washings, are they the second and the third washing, are they sunnah or are they mandub, or are they recommended acts? There's difference of opinion, right? So and sometimes I kind of wanted to mention this because sometimes when one's in a hurry, one kind of wants to know, okay, what do I have fard, I got the fard. What's the sunnah? What's the confirmed sunnah? The Prophet wouldn't leave, but the scholars didn't have enough proof to put it in the fard category. So that's the Malikis. They're pretty strict about what they call sunnah. And the ones we did, that previous slide, that's a confirmed sunnah. So, and that's why I wanted to mention that doing the repeated washings, is it sunnah or a recommended act? So if you're really stuck, okay, there's a difference of opinion about the second, third washing. So, if you're really in a hurry, you're like running late for class, something, you don't, you can go easy on yourself because shaitan has different inroads, right? So he comes different ways. He can sometimes say, oh, okay, you don't have to do that, and one has plenty of time, and one has the opportunity to do the extra, or one's really short on time, and then he comes and he's like, oh, you have to do that, and why didn't you do that? And so sometimes it helps to know a little bit of detail on these things. And then following the order of the sunnah acts is a virtue, because following the order of the fard is a sunnah. Does that make sense? So following the order of the fard acts, so doing the face before the full arm, that would be a sunnah. And then doing the sunnah acts in their order would be a virtuous act. But in any case, your wudu is valid. You have a valid wudu as long as you do the fard. It's makruh to leave the sunnah, and the sunnahs are a protection for the fard. So you don't want to leave them unless you're really, really stuck, right? And the virtues are another protection, and they'll protect the sunnahs also. Conserving water, and I know this is a struggle. We have to really, really struggle. There's a hadith about fitnat as-sarra. It's a longer hadith, and one of the things the Prophet mentioned is people having the test, the fitna, or the test of sarra, of ease. So we have a lot of ease, subhanAllah. and so we have to be extra careful in conserving water. I will try my best to use a bowl, or at least, you know, you know, turn the water on and off. But that's actually even harder. It's easy to get water in a bowl and just have it if one's doing wudu at the sink, or sometimes as much as I can, I'll actually, when I have time, I put a towel on my carpet. I have two small towels here hanging in my room, and I just leave them here, just easy access. And I have a bowl here, and usually I get water. I get drinking water, and I'll just leave it here in my room, and then I'll just use it for wudu also. And so I just have stuff ready, so if I'm home, then it's done easily. If I'm not home, that's a different thing. But if I'm home, that, you know, the access is there. So they're just like, we prepare different things. Like, I know somebody who, when they cook, before they don't cook and they don't chop everything the same day. They prepare, and they're like, that's half the battle. They'll chop everything, put it in the fridge, and then they'll cook on another day. And so we should prepare. You know, it's higher for us to prepare for things that are acts of worship, especially something basic like wudu. So you know, it makes it less overwhelming if things are ready. Conserving water, so it would be makruh to waste water. That's the least of it, is makruh, and it could be more than that. And the Prophet ﷺ's wudu was with one mud, so two of his, so if he, him putting his blessed hands ﷺ together and making like a cup. So if you put your hands together, if you make like a cup, and you don't bring the cup in too much and not out too much. Does that make sense? So it's like, you know how we put our hands together in dua, but we lift them up usually, right? So bring them down so they form like a bowl, and the bowl and the hands don't come close together too much, and they're not spread out too much. So that would be a mud. And it's approximately 0.5 liters. And then giving precedence to the right limb over the left. Again, if one does more, if you have to do more to make sure you do the areas that you have to do, you have to use more, and people are going to be a little bit different. But my teachers have shown us how one can do wudu. It's not, having the top on and having something ready, like having it in a container. Is this clear, inshallah? No questions so far? Is the volume, how is the volume? Is it still low? I'm just looking at your, Fatima, I'm just looking at your text. Is it still muffled? Okay, alhamdulillah. Okay, alhamdulillah. So any questions so far? Otherwise I'm going to move to the next slide. And please, as much as you can. Okay, alhamdulillah. I'm glad you heard that. It is clear but not loud. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Usually, it's interesting. Usually, because I have a mic, I usually don't have issues. How is that? Okay, it's really close to my mouth now. If it's muffled for anybody else, please let me know. But I have everything on full. So the next slide, inshallah. Okay, alhamdulillah. Okay, virtuous acts of wudu continue. So again, remember we said there were approximately 30 for some of the scholars. So I mentioning some of them. Covering the aura or the nakedness. So, if you're in the shower, again, in the shower there's other issues, but if we were making wudu in the shower, cover your nakedness. And one can get those camisoles or slips, we used to call them. They're like a little skirt. And just have that on. They're made of nylon, they don't retain water, and it's a way to to do this virtuous act easily. And subhanAllah, Sayyidah Aisha said, talked about, and the wives had asked the Prophet about conveying things that were done in private, and the Prophet told them to do that. And so she said that they never saw his private parts, and he never saw theirs, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I mean, it's permissible, right? But it's certainly a virtuous act to actually cover the nakedness, and it's a devotional act. In the Jahiliyyah, they would do a tawaf around the Kaaba uncovered. So they had some of the rituals remaining from Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, that they had ghusl also, because Sayyidina Abu Sufyan, he actually vowed to not make ghusl until he made a vow to do something to some of the Muslims. So they would make ghusl. They had that, but they didn't have the wudu. So covering the nakedness, again, it's alhamdulillah, something that's specific to, I mean, it's something that is praiseworthy in Islam, and that they tended to do less in the Jahiliyyah. Sitting on a raised platform, and it also prevents splashing. Alhamdulillah, in some of the wudu stations, like when I worked at a certain Muslim school, they had those raised platforms. It was really nice to do wudu sitting, and it certainly helps splashing. Making remembrance of Allah, and the wudu is so much better. It really gets rid of waswasa. And if you want to speak to, if somebody's speaking to you, if it's from the dunya, then I would, unless it's a parent, of course you don't want to stop a parent, but if it's somebody else, to say, if it can wait, I'd like to do my wudu and finish it before we speak, or just like give me 5-10 minutes or something like that. It's better to do that if it's from the dunya. If somebody's asking you questions, or I've seen the shiuch speak to people and they're talking about classes and things like that, because that wouldn't be from the dunya. Well, that's certainly making remembrance of Allah. There were two halal. The Prophet ﷺ came out of his blessed room, and he saw two groups. There's one group, the Sahaba were remembering Allah, because the Prophet ﷺ asked them. The other one, they were reviewing the durus. And subhanAllah, Shaykh Salman was saying that in one of their narrations, a lot of people have heard this hadith, but they haven't heard that one of the things in the second halaqah they were remembering is and they mentioned this in this hadith that has this extra narration about, they were talking about the blessing, what a blessing it was that the Prophet ﷺ was sent to them. That was the second group that was reviewing the dars. That's one of the things they were remembering, and they mentioned that to the Prophet ﷺ. That's like shama'il, subhanallah. And I was haven't done the shama'il class in a while. We did it a few years ago, and I was just thinking that would just be really nice to do that again, because it really brings one closer to the Prophet ﷺ. It ties all of this in, the fiqh, and connects one to the Prophet ﷺ. So, okay, so and then saying the shahada, so completing the wudu and saying the shahada, and it's one of the few times when we'll look up towards this sky. Generally, the Prophet wouldn't look up towards, like he was, out of his shyness, and it's also humility. But this is one of the times when you would look up towards the sky and say the shahada thing. And there's hadith that it opens up all the 8 doors of Jannah. And so, meaning if somebody passed away, and assuming those 8 doors were open for that person after they did the shahada thing, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu, that if they died, then they would enter from any of those 8 doors that they, any of those 8 doors. Well, Allah make us from those people. So another reason to stay in wudu as much as one can. And then the Hanafis have this too about reciting Surah Al-Qadr 3 times, and it's done. I actually found the proof for it in one of the Hanafi books. They had some textual proof for doing this 3 times. In Prohibition of the Tongue, he talks about one of the ways for one to control one's tongue is to recite Surah Al-Qadr, Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr, frequently, because the Laylatul Qadr has what? It mentions the revelation of the Quran, and so from the secrets of this surah is that it protects one from speech that's harmful. That and Surah An-Nas also, but here again, one would, if one can, again, it's recommended to recite Surah Al-Qadr. Surah Al-Qadr, the ulama have, they mention it. So I put a question mark because it's, one of my teachers wasn't sure one of my Maliki teachers wasn't sure of the proof of it. But definitely have been taught this by more than one teacher. And then 2 rak'ah of wudu. It's recommended, and, the Prophet ﷺ saw Sayyidina Bilal in Jannah, and he asked him about the most hopeful action that he'd done. And this is one of the things this is what Sayyidina Bilal mentioned, that he would do 2 rak'ah after wudu. You don't have to do them right. Ideally, one wants to do them right after wudu, but sometimes I don't do that, but I will still do them. Like sometimes I'll combine them with the nafl of dhuhr. And I was asking about that, and I was told, well, it's fine. Obviously, it's not ideal because one doesn't get the mubadara, like doing the act immediately. But even if you don't do it immediately, the 2 rak'ah after, we'll do it at some point with that intention. Placing open container on the right side. So if you're, inshallah, not using the tap and using a container, if it's open, then you would place it on the right. Right, so if you have like a bowl that you're doing wudu from, you would scoop the water with your hand, right? But if you had a container like something with a spout, like those watering cans like that we have in America, you would pour with your left hand. That's how you put one. If you're pouring, you would place it on the left. So you pour with your left into your right hand. Right, but if you're scooping, so it's an open container, you place it on the right. If you're pouring, on the left, but you want to make sure your hands are washed before you scoop into, because then you'll get all the water dirty. So you want to pour first anyway if the hands are not clean. Beginning with the right and the front of the limb, particularly the head. Right, the right and the front of the limb. So you would begin with your fingers, like before you. Your fingers, and go down to your elbows, right? And particularly the head, because that's very makruh to do wipe the head starting with the bottom of the head. So it's against the practice of sunnah. Question: it's makruh to speak during wudu if it's from the dunya. It's not makruh absolutely, but it's makruh conditionally. So if you ideally want to recite, because it's a devotional act. If we're doing wudu in a bathroom with a toilet, should we say these things in our head? Correct. Yes, if there's a toilet, according to the Malikis, then it would be makruh to do dhikr if there's a toilet area. And Quran would be impermissible. So, but dhikr is on the tongue, so it wouldn't count as dhikr. And the Malikis are a little bit strict of doing wudu in the toilet. It's valid, not in the toilet, but where there's a toilet. It's valid, but it's actually makruh. I know there's difference of opinion in the other schools. I know the Hanafis, they have a more nuanced answer. Is that clear? Any other questions? So I'll move to the next slide and then let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so we're still continuing with virtues of wudu. Slide 3. Rubbing between toes with the little finger. Yes, ideally, if you can find another place to do wudu where there's no toilet, you want to do that. If the toilet is, in some houses they have a toilet, but there's a door to the toilet, then that's fine. Then that's considered the toilet's in a separate room. Because the toilet is, even if it's totally clean, it's considered an impure place. And the shayateen are going to be there even if it's clean and there's no najasa there. That's their home. So it's considered an impure place, and this is our wudu, right? It's one of the ways we get close to Allah, and so it's makruh to do it, but the wudu is valid. According to Malikis, again, there's a little bit of difference of opinion, between the schools. So if you have a choice, you want to find a place that doesn't have a toilet, or a toilet with where you can close the door. Rubbing between the toes. So you have to get water between the toes with actual rubbing, which is dalk, which we mentioned, right? Generally, dalk is for the areas that you have to wash is required. You have to do it. It's part of the obligation. But to actually rub between the toes with the little finger is recommended. So if somebody just got water between the toes and didn't actually rub in between the toes, they just left a virtuous act. Does that make sense? I mean, there's no just in it, but they didn't leave a fard, and as far as you know, it's virtuous, and it's not in the category of sunnahs. Okay, and then a note about beard and likewise facial hair. If the beard is thick, it's okay to do a wet wipe, and then for the beard, like that runs down, off the face, you would run the fingers through it and move water around. This is for the brothers. And then for thin facial hair, any facial hair, so this is on the face, right? If the skin is visible at first glance, so somebody has thin eyebrows, and the way you tell what's considered thin, legally, meaning Islamically, is if the skin is visible at first glance. If the skin is visible at first glance, if somebody looks at your eyebrows, you can ask someone and say, okay, can you see the skin underneath my hair? And if they say yes, then when you're doing wudu, you have to get water underneath the hair. If it's thick, which would be if the skin's not visible at first glance, then that you don't have to get water into the skin. So it's like that hair now is the skin that you have to get water on. Is that clear? So there's a couple of different things here. So there's the issue of the beard being thick, because the beard's going to grow off the face. So for the beard, one would still run fingers through it and move the water around. And then there's the issue of the general hair that's on the face, and whether it's thick or thin. Is that clear, inshallah? Okay, takhleel, whoever does not do takhleel of his hands, Allah will do takhleel of his hands with the fire in the akhirah. So I'm sorry, this hadith should be in the fard area, because the hand, so if you put a hand, I think I might have mentioned this last time, if you if you're washing your right hand, like you're doing the full hand and the forearm, because that's the fard, right? You have to repeat washing your hands when you're doing the whole arm. So during that time, what you do is you put your right, or put your left hand on top of your right hand with palms facing down for both of them, and interlace the fingers, and then move the fingers so that you're moving the fingers of the left hand through the fingers of the right hand. That's the khli. And make sure you also get the area between the index finger and the thumb. Is that clear? Can everybody do that? And they would do the same thing when they're washing the left hand. So I'll wait till everybody does that, until everybody tried that. The takhleel of the hands would be part of the fard. The takhleel of the toes would be a virtuous act. When washing the hands, yeah. So the rubbing, that's that first bullet of the toes, that's recommended because it's the toes. But the takhleel, or the rubbing in between the fingers, that would be obligatory. Maybe I need to, I'll move that, inshallah. I'll move this bullet point. And any feedback, subhanAllah, I've looked at these slides so much, it seems that it's difficult for me to say what needs more clarity. So feel free, please, to give feedback. Also, I know some of my teachers, they'll actually write everything out. Like, they'll make full sentences, and I tend to use phrases. So I don't know which is clearer. So if you feel that it's actually clear to have full sentences, but there's going to be a lot more slides, if that is actually better, then I can, for the future, for other classes, I can actually, write things, spell things out. So again, let me know that. And then interlacing sunnah with fard actions is recommended, meaning doing it in the order, like doing the hands first, then the mouth, right? So it's hand first, just the hands up to the wrist, that's a sunnah. Then the mouth is a sunnah. Then the nose is a sunnah. And then the first fard is the face, the full face. So doing it in this order where you're interlacing them, right? Sunnah, 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 fard. Right? That would be recommended. So technically one could do it in any order, but would be against what we understand to be how the Prophet ﷺ did. And then, sometimes, somebody might have very large hands, or might have very, it might, for them to actually do one complete wash of the face or of the hands, they might actually, maybe they didn't get enough water the first time. So whatever completes the wash of that face, of that limb, that's considered the first wash. Is that clear? And then the second wash would be once the first wash is complete. So I just wanted to mention that point. So you could have 2 half first washes, right? And then you go to the second wash, for example. Okay, and then the du'as. I have a Mac, and Arabic is not written very easily on the Mac, so I apologize. Hopefully you can take a picture of this. It just, alhamdulillah, I could even get the words to connect. But these are the du'as. Allahumma jalni min at-tawwabina wa jalni min al-mutatahhirin. Allahumma اغفر لي ذنبي وسع لي في داري وبارك لي في رزقي وقنعني بما رزقتني ولا تفتني بما زويت عني. So I testify that there's only one God, Allah, and that he has no partners, and I testify that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his servant, slave, and messenger. O Allah, make me from those who repent often. Tawwabin are those that repent often, so turn to him often, and make me from those who purify themselves, mutatahhirin, and make me from your righteous servant. And make you from the righteous servants. I don't have that in the Arabic because in some of the books they don't mention that. وَجَعَلْنِي مِنْ عِبَادِكَ الصَّالِحِينَ. So I actually didn't write that, although I say it, so I must have learned it from one of my teachers. And then that last dua, oh Allah, forgive my sins. اللهم اغفر لي ذنبي ووسع لي, and make spacious for me my home. ووسع لي في داري. Right, because it's not how big it is, but it's like I mean, some of it's physical, but some of it's just feeling that it's spacious. وسع لي في Daddy, make spacious for me my home. Bless my provision, because it's not how much, but it's how blessed it is. Make me content with what you have provided me, and don't leave me to be tempted with what you have kept away from me. Because there's things that Allah Ta'ala didn't give us, right? I don't know if I told this story here, but there's a Sahabi, there's a delegation, there's a group that came, I believe they were from Yemen, and from them there was several of them. Imagine you're just visiting the Prophet ﷺ one time, and I think this was towards the end of the Prophet ﷺ's life, and they came like one time, and how many weeks and weeks it took them to cross the desert, and they used to have, the sacred months they wouldn't fight, and so during the other months it would be hard to cross, because it would mean you would be crossing warring territory between you and the other tribes. So, they would only be feel safe to travel in probably many situations in during the sacred months, the 4 sacred months. So, anyway, the delegation came, and this group came, and they asked the Prophet ﷺ for certain du'as before they were leaving, and this young boy, he came and he asked the Prophet ﷺ for dua, and he asked him, he said, from the du'as that he asked was that Allah give him contentment. Inshallah, next slide, I'll make a note. I can post that dua. It's really beautiful. So, and the Prophet ﷺ made dua for him, and that was one of the du'as that Allah make him content, like ghina nafs. And they say he was known to be the most content person. Allah make us from the people that are content. فَلَا, alright, وَلَا تَفْتِنِّي بِمَا زَوَيْتَ عَنِّي, like what you kept away from me, don't tempt me with it. Oh, I wish I had that, or I wish this and that. And I was mentioning yesterday in a class I did that لَوْ يَفْتَحُ بَابَ الشَّيْطَانِ, would that I had done this, would that I had done that, would that I had, it opens up the door for shaitan. لكن قل قدر الله وما شاء فعل. But say قدر الله وما شاء فعل. Allah decreed it. Once it's happened, one can say that, right? قدر الله, Allah decreed it. One can't say it beforehand because we don't know what Allah will be decreeing. وما شاء فعل, and what He willed, He did. قدر الله وما شاء فعل. Because law will open up the door for grief. Shaitan gets in there and he's like, oh, if you had done this and that, and this would have happened. And no, qaddar Allah, it's all you've done, khalas. And now you can call it the decree of Allah, because it's done. وَمَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ. And then there's a lot of, it removes a lot of grief, and can, prevent one from just, a lot of remorse. So the believer just learns from one's mistakes and just moves on. Okay, so here's the transliteration for anybody who wants that. Look at the sky and say the 2 shahadas, and Allahumma jalni min at-tawwabin wa ja'alni min al-mutatahhirin. And in the red, because this is what I say also, wa ja'alni min ibadika as-salihin. I noticed again it wasn't in at least one of my dua books, the red, so I kept it in red if somebody doesn't want to say that. اللهم اغفر لي ذنبي ووسع لي في داري وبارك لي في رزقي وقنعني بما رزقتني ولا تفتني بما زويت عني. I think I said it with the shadda, but بما زويت عني. It's not with the shadda. بما زويت عني. Inshallah, this is clear. So again, this is the transliteration to the du'as in Arabic. And again, the Arabic, I really tried to, make it bolder and all kinds of things. And it just, with the Mac, alhamdulillah, it's a great, great Mac blessing to have. And I use my computer a lot, so it was just very good. But one thing is the Arabic is tricky. Okay, post wudu issues. Any questions so far? And again, please do give me feedback about the slides if you'd like them written out more, or if doing them like this without the, without without completing the sentences is fine. Let me know. So post wudu issues. If the limbs are not dried in normal conditions, repeat missed limbs. So say you found that you forgot something in your wudu. You washed part of your face, and your limbs haven't dried. So you just did wudu, limbs haven't dried. So then you go, you wash the rest of your face, and then everything that would come after washing the face, right? So the hands, the wiping of the head, the feet, all of that. And you make the intention of completing your wudu. And you're washing the rest, everything that comes after, because you're washing it again, you just do it once. If the limbs have dried, so, and it depends. Like they say, somebody who's younger, their limbs won't dry as fast, depending on the climate, depending on your skin. As we get older, our skin, as women especially, tends to get drier much faster. So if the limbs have dried, then repeat only the missed limb with the intention that you're completing wudu. So as soon as you realize, then you have to go right away, pretty much. So you can't delay it till the time to where the limb would dry. So as soon as you remember, pretty much right away, you have to go and wash that limb with the intention of completing the wudu, and that's it, and your wudu is valid. If you delay it to the time to where the limbs would dry, to that extent of time, then you have to do your entire wudu again. Is that clear, inshallah? And then repeat prayers if a fard limb was left out, even part of it, then one would need to repeat the prayer. Prayed with it. If you left a sunnah of wudu, then don't repeat the prayer, but do them before the next prayer. Repeat the sunnahs of the wudu that you left, or a sunnah like gargling, or putting water up the nose and then taking it out, because it's discouraged to leave. And again, it's something that the Prophet ﷺ would do on a regular basis, and as far as we know, he did not leave these confirmed sunnahs. Okay, now another issue. So if you're washing your face but you missed your hands at the beginning, washing the hands at the beginning we said it's a confirmed sunnah, even if your hands are clean, washed, but washing them at the beginning of wudu is sunnah. So now the general rule is, if you start off hard, you don't go back to the sunnah, because even though it's sunnah, but the scholars didn't put it in the fard category, it's lower than the fard. So that's a general principle, that you don't leave the fard for the to do a sunnah. So complete, you could do it two ways. So if you're washing your face, you would go back and wash. You can finish your face. You finish your face, and then you can go back and wash your hands, or you can complete your entire wudu and then go back and wash your hands. Inshallah, that's clear. Okay. Okay, and then this is what I mentioned about the basmala. This is just a note, FYI. Do you say the Bismillah or Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim or Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? There's different opinion. It's sunnah, so again, it takes a lot for the Malikis to say sunnah, so when you're eating or drinking. And generally with eating and drinking, it's what I was taught is to say just the Bismillah. But in Sidi Khalil, he says there's difference of opinion. It's wajib when one's slaughtering an animal. And by the way, women can slaughter too. It's not just for the men. I tried it one time when we did the fiqh of slaughtering. A friend, a sister and I, we actually went to a farm here where they slaughter a couple of hours from us. It was just, some of the sunnahs were left because I guess some of the rules, and I was new, so I was just trying. There were some brothers actually, alhamdulillah, were there, and they helped us. And the chickens were slaughtered in front of the other chickens, and I could hear them screaming. And it's like, one's not supposed to do that, because they can sense that, and all these other things. They stun the animal. Not the chickens, but they didn't stun the chickens, but they stunned, I think, was it sheep, or I can't remember what else we had done, or saw being done, and that was really horrible to watch. It's actually makruh, the stunning is makruh, but actually excited about that, and he said it's not makruh to eat the meat. But apparently by law, they actually have to stun the animal. It's horrible. And imagine electrocuting an animal, and that's what that is, a mild electric shock. So, subhanAllah. But I just wanted to do it just to see what it's like. So sometimes you have to practice things to just get the fiqh of it. It's recommended, so again, the Bismillah, when you're writing and on an animal, riding an animal, sorry about that, riding an animal, or riding ships, or riding a car. I mean, in general, anything that's, again, that has some weight in the Sharia, it's going to be recommended to say Bismillah. But it's specifically more so for these acts, i.e. to say Bismillah. So even the ones in this third category where it says recommended, it's more of a recommendation. Just like, it's recommended to do nafil prayer in general, other than the times when, it's not recommended. But in general, nafil is recommended, but it's more so before dhuhr and after dhuhr. So here again, it's generally for any weighty act in the Sharia, it's recommended to say the Bismillah, but more so when riding an animal, ship, entering or exiting a home, your home, any home, masjid, entering or exiting the masjid, dressing, closing the door, turning off the light, intercourse, sexual intercourse, and then the khatib, the person giving the khutbah, when he's climbing the pulpit, closing eyes of the deceased. So specific recommendations. Okay, and then I'm just gonna hopefully just do this, and then the makruh acts. Any questions so far? Okay, makruh acts. It's in general, like I mentioned, makruh to leave a sunnah and to wash past the obligatory areas. So more is not necessarily better in the Maliki, and sometimes in the other madhahib too, from what I know of them. So washing past the elbows, I know in some of the other madhahib it's recommended. It would be makruh in the Maliki. Washing what is white, so washing the ears, for example, right? Because again, the wiping is built upon ease, so one wouldn't even do the creases mistake here. Interrupting the wudu. If the limb does not dry. Right? So, for example, it's such a short interruption that the limb wouldn't dry. That's makruh, discouraged. But one does not shorten it to where the limb would dry. You wouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. And again, consideration, like, how do you tell? You look at your skin, your age, elevation, like, are you at sea level, or are you at a higher altitude? And again, makruh to speak of worldly matters, to wipe the creases, the folds we mentioned, like when you're doing the ears, for example, beginning with the back of the limb, right? Again, so starting with the elbows before doing the fingers, for example, because it's contrary to the sunnah. Or doing the bottom of the head before doing the top of the head. Wiping the neck, the Maliki say is makruh. Now, I know it's different in some of the other schools, but the Maliki say it's makruh. Okay. And then, so, if you have doubt, did I do 3 washings or 3 or 4? Right? Did I do 2 or 3? Sorry. Did I do 2 or 3? It would be makruh to add another washing. Because if you did 3, then you're adding extra. So there's difference of opinion. Is it recommended or makruh to add another washing? In general, the rule is دفع الضرر مقدم على جلب النوافع. Warding off the harm is given precedence over acquiring benefit, and subhanAllah, a lot of times we don't think of these things, but there's harm. Shara'an, according to Sharia, it will be considered harmful for the believer to actually do certain things. So, for example, if there's a possibility that it's makruh, then that's considered harmful. And so, if you have 2 things, one is recommended and another, but it's also going to entail you to do something that's possibly makruh, you would leave it. It's higher to leave it. A lot of times people will do something that's recommended, but then they'll do a makruh act in the process. So generally speaking, that would be higher to leave. And then makruh to uncover the nakedness during wudu. Okay. Any questions? I was thinking maybe we should stop here and then cover the nullifiers of wudu. So, for example, what does it mean washing? What is wipe? So, what are the limbs that we actually do a wet wipe off in wudu? We wash certain limbs in wudu and we do a wet wipe of that, right? Somebody asked me a question yesterday in class, and I turned around and asked them a question, and I was telling them how one of my shuyukh, he mentioned that Mu'arraf al-Hajj did that with him, and it's good to ask questions. I think being a student and a teacher. So washing, no worries, Mariam. Washing, you do a wet wipe off your ears in wudu, right? So to actually wash the ears would be makruh. So more is not necessarily better. And to actually wash the head in wudu would be makruh. Does that make sense, inshallah? So I think this is a lot of material. And again, please do give me feedback about the slides and how you prefer them. So maybe we need to stop here. We can actually do class maybe in another couple of weeks. We had said, I think, monthly is what we had decided, but I know we've gone at least a month since the last class. So we can have it sooner if you all like. Jazallahu anna sayyidina sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahla. Jazallahu anna sayyidina sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahla. Jazallahu anna sayyidina sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahla. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. So maybe you all can give me feedback if you want to have class in 2 weeks maybe, or we can do one more class next weekend and do the nullifiers of wudu. How does that work for everyone? We could do them now, but we'll be going over. We'll be over an hour. It's up to all of you. So what about making within the shower like we do in ghusl? But so for the head you wipe. Correct. You would wipe and not wash. That's the thing about wudu in the shower. I can add maybe a little bit. Let's see. Maybe we can do some of the makruhat, some of the nullifiers maybe, just really quickly, so that's covered. So what nullifies wudu? Events or hadath, or ritual impurity. So ritual as opposed to physical impurity, or an event that happens that for example, if one fell asleep, something could happen. One could pass wind that would break, would cause a ritual impurity, right? So, that's what I mean there. Number one. Versus physical impurity. So passing of urine, feces, events or passing of urine, feces, madi, which is fluid emitted after foreplay or thoughts. It's impermissible to fantasize about other than one's spouse, but that's the ruling. It also, if there's the lesser fluid that comes out, that's called madi. It breaks wudu and not the ghusl. Wadi or prostatic fluid, that's for men only, and it's devoid of lust. It's not going to have any lust associated with it. It doesn't come after foreplay or fantasizing. Flatulence, passing wind. If something exits from one of the two exits, then it must be atypical. Sorry, I did the slide several times. Must be must be atypical, meaning not typical. Must not. It must not be atypical. So something that's atypical. So if it's atypical, it won't break wudu. Won't break wudu. Meaning, worms don't typically come out from persons. The two exits, right? Or stones. So in the Maliki school, they won't break wudu. I know there's a difference in the other schools. So in the Maliki, they won't break wudu. Worms, stones, things like that, because it's atypical. So something that typically exits from the two exits, that would break wudu. So urine, feces, things like that. Injections, suppositories, so inserting one's finger in one of the two exits, it doesn't break one's wudu. Okay, possible causes for events. Sleep, right? If it's light, and the way you know if it's light sleep, it's what if you can hear the people around you, or if you have something in your hand and if it fell, you would actually be aware of it. That's considered light sleep. And if it's long, light sleep, then it would be recommended to do wudu from it, but it doesn't break wudu. If it's long, light sleep to where you can hear voices around you, or if you had something in your hand and if it fell, you would actually be aware of it, but it's light sleep. Because the idea is that if one's in that state of light sleep, that if one passed wind, one would be aware of it. So it's not the sleep itself, but it's something coming out that actually breaks one's wudu. If one's in light sleep, one would be aware of it. That's the issue. Heavy sleep in the Maliki, it breaks wudu, and that's where one's not aware of if the voices around one, or if somebody calls your name, you don't hear it, things like that. Insanity, intoxication, loss of consciousness. Okay, and this is something that the Malikis is stricter about, doubt. If you have doubt, meaning 50-50. Did I break my wudu? Did I not break my wudu? Right? It's 50-50. It's not like, most, I 30% chance I broke my wudu. That's not considered shak legally. In fact, if you have doubt whether I actually performed wudu, 50-50, did I do my wudu or not? Then you're not considered to be wudu. 50-50 chance. I'm sure I did my wudu, but did I lose it or not? Not whisper, not waswasa. If you're a person of waswasa, you have to ignore your doubts. You have to. So you have a totally different ruling. So if you get that doubt about wudu every day, once a day, and you're getting it a few days in a row, then you're considered a person of waswasa, and you have a totally different ruling. So you have to ignore the doubt. So you don't do the 50-50. Then you have to have certainty that you broke your wudu. During the prayer, okay, so letter D, sorry. If you have doubt in the prayer, because shaitan comes and causes waswasa. So in the prayer, if you have doubt, you continue your prayer. And then after your prayer, if you still have that doubt, 50-50, and you're not no waswas, then you broke your wudu. If you're a person of misgivings, you ignore doubt, period, in the prayer, outside of the prayer. But during the prayer, everyone, even if you're not a person of, even if you're not C, and you have doubt, 50-50, I lost my wudu, didn't lose my wudu, you have to continue your prayer. And then you finish, and then, okay, Is it still 50-50 and I'm not letter C, person of misgivings, then I need to go do my wudu. Touching breaks wudu if pleasure is intended or derived. From whom pleasure typically is derived from. Right, so an adult or some, well, not necessarily the adult, but somebody who typically, so not like a very young child. And absolutely lips to lips, whether one intended pleasure or didn't intend pleasure, or one derived pleasure or not. Lips to lips kissing, generally the ruling is it breaks the wudu unless a husband is, for example, or a wife, generally it's going to be the husband, but the spouse is going to leave the house and they give the kiss of rahma, it's called, like they're leaving, they're going on a travel or something like that, and that's the kiss of rahma. Or somebody's sick, right, and they kiss lips, the husband kisses the wife lips to lips, or vice versa. That is an exception to the rule that kissing lips to lips breaks the wudu. But otherwise, generally, kissing lips to lips is going to break wudu. As far as touching oneself, right? So again, we're in this category of touching oneself. For the male, if he touches himself with his inner palm, right, or the inner part of the finger, so not the outer part of the finger, or the side. With darker skinned people, you can tell where, if you look at the side of your hand, you can see where the skin is darker and where it's lighter. So the lighter would be considered the inner palm, or the inner part of the finger if you're past the palm. That, if the male touches himself, then that would break the wudu. If he touches his organ. For the female, there's difference of opinion. There's an opinion that a female can touch herself anywhere and doesn't break wudu. There's an opinion that if she touches herself between the folds, it breaks wudu. And there is a third opinion that if she touches herself anywhere on the private parts, it breaks wudu. So, inshallah, that's clear. And I should stop. This is actually a lot of material. And I actually, I'm looking at some of these slides and I want to redo some of the material also. Is this clear, the stuff that we went over? Inshallah, there's no questions? Jazallahu anna sayyidina sallallahu alayhi wa sallam jazallahu anna sayyidina sallallahu alayhi wa sallam jazallahu anna sayyidina sallallahu alayhi wa sallam subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al mursalin.